All right, everybody, get ready, because today we are taking a deep dive into the world of a true iconoclast, Voltaire. You've probably heard that quote, crush the infamous thing.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's so much more to this guy than just a memorable line.
Yeah, Voltaire, he wasn't just about catchy phrases. This was a philosopher, playwright, historian, even dabbled in science a bit.
Wow.
A true Enlightenment man. When you think about challenging the status quo, challenging religion, government, Voltaire was at the forefront.
It seems like every time I come across something about Voltaire, there's always that mention, that word, Bastille.
Right, right.
What is it about Voltaire and that infamous prison? What's the story there?
Well, let's just say his words. They can be pretty pointed, pretty critical. And the people in power, they weren't exactly thrilled with his critiques, especially when those critiques chipped away at their authority.
So we've got this sharp-witted, rebellious writer, not afraid to ruffle some feathers. But why should we, in the 21st century, care about a guy who lived centuries ago? What makes Voltaire still relevant today?
Because those battles that he was fighting, freedom of speech, religious tolerance, the idea that reason should guide us, not dogma, those are things we're still grappling with.
Very much so.
His ideas, they were forged in censorship, fueled by this passion for human progress, and they still resonate today.
Okay, so I'm ready to go deeper. Give me the Voltaire crash course. Who was this guy?
All right, so born François-Marie Arouet in 1694, gets a classical Jesuit education, which is kind of ironic.
Oh, how so?
Because he becomes one of the Catholic Church's most vocal critics.
They created a monster almost, it seems.
Right.
So did that upbringing, did that play into his views on religion later on?
It definitely had an influence. But Voltaire, he wasn't an atheist. He considered himself a deist.
Deist, meaning?
Meaning he believed in a creator God, a God who doesn't really interfere with human affairs. He's got that famous line, if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. Shows you that practical side, religion as a social construct, but not something to be used for oppression or to stifle reason.
And stifle reason, it did, at least according to Voltaire. He really went after the Catholic Church. That's where the whole crush the infamous thing comes from, right?
Exactly. The infamous thing. That was the church. Its power, its role in his view, perpetuating superstition, intolerance, a roadblock to progress, plain and simple.
So it wasn't just a disagreement on, theological points, but the whole institution itself and its power in society.
Exactly. And it wasn't just theoretical for him. He was passionate about religious tolerance, hated seeing religious minorities persecuted.
He didn't just talk the talk then.
No, he walked the walk, big time.
Right.
Most famously was Jean Calas.
Who was that?
Protestant guy, wrongly accused of killing his own son to stop him converting to Catholicism. Voltaire was horrified, campaigned tirelessly to clear his name.
Wow. So not just an intellectual exercise, this was about real people's lives.
Exactly.
That's something else. How did that experience, the Calas case, how did that end up shaping his views on, tolerance and individual rights even more?
Yeah, the Calas case really solidified his views on religious freedom. I mean, really fueled his fight for justice. It even led him to write that treatise on tolerance.
Oh, right. I've heard of that.
Powerful work against religious persecution, really a cornerstone of his fight for individual rights.
It's incredible to think, how one man's struggle centuries ago can still resonate today. Really makes you think about those ideas, those core Voltaire ideas, like freedom of speech. That feels more relevant than ever.
Isn't there a famous quote about Voltaire defending someone's right to say something, even if you completely disagree with it?
I think you're talking about the one that goes, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Though, funny thing is,
What's that?
it's actually not directly from Voltaire. It's a paraphrase, came from a biographer years later.
You're kidding. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But it does seem to perfectly capture his views, though, right?
Yeah.
The sentiment, absolutely, yeah. It gets to the heart of his belief in free speech. Voltaire argued that real progress, you need open debate, even especially when it makes you uncomfortable. Censorship? To him, stagnation, plain and simple.
So it wasn't just, Voltaire being controversial just to be controversial or a shock jock of his day. He really believed that more speech, even stuff you hate, ultimately leads to a better understanding.
Exactly. He really felt that by having all these ideas out there, even the ones we disagree with, we get exposed to new perspectives, challenge our own assumptions.
Yeah.
It's that friction, right? That grappling. It refines our thinking, brings us closer to truth.
Iron sharpens iron, as they say.
Exactly.
But didn't Voltaire also say something about the importance of using our reason, especially in ethics, morality? How does that square with, this emphasis on just letting it all hang out, free speech? Wouldn't he worry about misinformation spreading or just bad ideas taking hold?
That is a great question. And it brings up this really interesting tension in how he thought. Because he was all about free speech, but not just a free-for-all of unchecked opinions.
Okay.
He definitely felt reason had a huge role to play, discerning truth from lies.
So how do you balance those two? Free expression, but also like critical thinking, making judgments?
It's the million-dollar question, and it's one we're still figuring out. With Voltaire, it seems like the answer was in education and intellectual honesty.
Interesting.
He believed if people had the tools to think critically, if they were encouraged to really question everything, they'd be able to navigate this world of information.
He had a lot of faith in humanity, it sounds like.
He did.
This ability to reason our way to a better understanding. But he wasn't all serious intellectual debate, right? He was a satirist, too.
Oh, yeah.
We got to talk about Candide. Tried reading that back in college, I'll be honest. Went right over my head.
A lot of people feel that way about Candide. It's one of those. But under that wit, it's a deep critique of blind optimism. You've got Candide, this naive guy, right? And his mentor, Pangloss, who's this is the best of all possible worlds, even when things are falling apart.
Oh, I'm starting to remember that now.
Right.
So Voltaire's using humor to challenge this idea that everything happens for a reason. We should just accept suffering.
That's it. He's showing us how silly that is through Candide, through these crazy adventures. It's a challenge to actually do something about injustice, not just accept it.
Reminds me of that line at the end, we must cultivate our garden. Always loved that, but not sure I fully got it.
It's one of those endings, open to interpretation, but many people see it as a call to action.
Yeah.
Instead of endless debate, accepting things as they are, Voltaire's saying, focus on what you can control, your actions, your little corner of the world.
Make a difference here and now, not just like theorizing about a perfect world.
Exactly. And this leads us to another big part of Voltaire empiricism, how we even know anything at all.
Oh, wow. So we're going from satire to social change to, like, the theory of knowledge now.
Exactly. Voltaire, he was hugely influenced by guys like John Locke,
Okay.
who said knowledge comes from experience, from our senses, not just ideas we're born with.
Right.
So observation, experimentation, the scientific method, he loved that stuff.
So instead of, like, blindly following what we're told, Voltaire is saying, get out there, see the world for yourself.
That's it. Test those assumptions, gather evidence, let that shape how you see things. Like scientists in their labs, but he felt it applied to everything.
That's interesting. But you said he was a champion of reason, too. So which is it? Should we trust our senses or our minds?
And that's the cool thing about Voltaire, that little paradox. Because he knew empiricism, just relying on what we observe, it's not enough.
Right.
Especially with morality, ethics, those big questions.
You can't just look around at the world and be like, well, tough luck, that's how it is, if there's injustice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Voltaire would be the first to say, question that. Use your reason. Think critically. That's how we make a better world, not just observe it.
It's like a balance then. Experience and reason, both tools for progress.
Exactly.
And he put those beliefs into action. Religious tolerance, a fairer legal system, even spoke out against slavery.
Which, let me tell you, was radical for his time.
Oh, absolutely.
Shows you the core of the guy.
Yeah.
Human dignity, equality, that mattered to him.
When we look back on Voltaire, the wit, the satire, the fight for justice, what do you think has had the most impact? What's his legacy?
It's got to be that unwavering belief in thinking critically. He empowered us to question, to demand evidence, to never just accept things as they are. Progress isn't a given,
Yeah, right.
It takes work, it takes vigilance, commitment to reason, and, the guts to challenge those in power.
It really makes you think about today, Information overload, echo chambers, truth is like shifting sand. What do you think Voltaire would say about how we find truth now, how we fight for a better world in all this mess?
The million-dollar question. I have a feeling he'd tell us, be wary of easy answers. Approach everything with a little skepticism. Never stop questioning. Use that reason of yours to separate fact from fiction. And hold on to those ideals. Justice, tolerance, individual liberty. Never let go, even when it's tough.
It's a call to action for all of us. To be engaged, to be informed, and to never stop fighting for better. just like Voltaire did. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Voltaire. We hope you're leaving with a little more curiosity, that commitment to critical thinking, and maybe, just maybe, a touch of Voltaire's own rebellious spirit.